Let's get straight to the point with views from both sides of the aisle. We now welcome Austin Barber and Brandon Jones to our MPB studios. Austin is a Republican strategist and founder of the Clearwater Group. Brandon is an attorney and former Democratic member of the Mississippi House of Representatives. Gentlemen, welcome back to At Issue.
Thanks for having us.
Again. Right?
Maybe one of the... I hope we're about done.
Yeah, we'll see.
Maybe
we'll
one
see.
or two more shows.
We'll see what they do with this
I am
conference.
enjoying this, but that means that we're done with the legislative session.
Yeah. Well, it's been another big week at the Capitol, all over the debate about Medicaid expansion. The building hosted probably the largest rallies to date on the issue, including members of various faith communities, a slew of healthcare providers. They all want to see full expansion, and they're sharing that message loudly. One key group that's been essentially silent during this debate, though, is that of hospital leadership. So should we expect them to chime in, or does this silence point to the silence up to this point already say enough? Brandon, I'll start with you.
Well, so I think this is a four-alarm fire. This is an issue that, we've talked about endlessly on here, but it's more importantly, it's an issue that's been talked about throughout the state for years now, throughout the country. And I think it's always worth reminding our faithful listeners that we are one of the very last states in the union to make peace with Medicaid expansion, which is the public health care system our country has chosen to adopt.
As opposed to like a single-payer system?
This is the
like
going system that the United States has chosen to have, and Mississippi has year after year opted out, due primarily to obstinance by our political leaders. And so I've said from the beginning, every hospital administrator, every doctor, every emergency room staff member, every nurse, every person close to the system should be hoarse and running up every cell phone bill they've got to make inquiries and request of this legislature, because there is no bigger issue, and we've never been this close to having expansion. Now, where are the administrators? I don't know. I thought it was a big mistake to blow up the Mississippi Hospital Association. I thought that was an effective lobbying tool.
And that
since
came
then,
on the heels of the election. I mean, that came during the election.
That came because Tate Reeves demanded
No.
it.
I have to jump in.
Yeah, please jump in.
Because there's multiple things you said that I disagree with, and I'll get to both of you here in just a second.
Okay.
I'll go in,
Disagree with the question.
I'll go in order. I'll go
Disagree
in
with
order.
the question. There's nothing. There's any factual.
Who has said that the hospitals have remained silent? Where did that come from? Is that a story? Is that? I'm very curious to know where
the hospitals being silent. They're not part of this coalition that's at the Capitol. Okay. The Hospital Association, unless you know something I don't, has not been publicly present and speaking on this issue.
I don't know of one hospital CEO, and I know a lot of them, one hospital administrator who is not for this.
Yeah, but that's not the same thing as advocating.
No,
right.
No, and who has not been talking about this for multiple years. Who is not, because they're not standing on the steps with whatever group is out there. That does not mean that they're not advocating for this. You can have just as much effective dialogue with having a private conversation with the member in your district.
There's no debating that. There's no doubting that.
So I don't agree with the premise of the question. Secondly, the Hospital Association did not get blown up because Tate Reeves said we need to blow up the Hospital Association. You may think he has that much power, but that's not what happened. The Hospital Association fractured because of political decisions that they had made for 15 or 20 years. And, when you're in a powerful position like running a hospital association or the Bankers Association or whatever it is, you have to make decisions. You have to make strategic, tactical decisions. And sometimes they don't go your way. And sometimes you may go all in and you have to face the repercussions. But that doesn't mean it's the fault of one political party or another. You're my friend, but I disagree with you.
Well, I mean, I disagree wholeheartedly. It was very clear that Tate Reeves put political pressure on individual hospitals to say, if you want a part of my Band-Aid fix, you've got to get out of your political association.
I love you, ma'am, but that just didn't happen.
Well, Well,
didn't.
All of the
let's save it
hospitals
for-
that were on stage with him during that press conference for his Medicaid plan were all ones that left
Yeah,
the
but
hospital
those are also
association.
the biggest hospitals in the state, and also some of the smallest ones. That's just not fair.
But let's get to the larger question.
Why are we
here.
debating the
Well,
hospital association?
here's a larger question. Now, we week after week talk about this issue, and sometimes it comes up with like, what are stakeholders doing? And certainly, hospitals are a big stakeholder in this
course they are,
conversation,
no doubt.
And I think let me try to put my perspective on this just to kind of crystallize it. There's no evidence of strong hospital advocacy. What you're saying is, take my word for it, it's happening. There's no public pronouncement. They don't have to be on the same stage as the preachers. They don't have to be on the same stage as the advocates.
Sure.
But what stage are they on? And how are they using their voice? Because we keep saying week after week, this is a very private conversation. We don't know exactly how it's happening, but they couldn't be convicted of open advocacy because there's no evidence of advocacy, because there's no writing.
Because y'all
there's
say
no
so.
photo. Well, no. I'm saying
that's what you're saying.
You should put up the
It's-
evidence.
it's-
You should put up the burden's on you.
Wow.
You're saying
Wow.
they're doing it. Where are they
Yeah.
doing it?
But
Show us
it's-
what they're doing.
but
What are
that's-
they
but
doing?
Y'all are the one who brought this up. Y'all are the one who were saying the hospitals are staying silent. I'm telling you,
Well,
they're
then
not.
tell us
doing
where they're
anything.
not.
My-
Tell
What
us
do you
where they're
want
not.
me to do? Do you want me to go? Here's a text message. Hold on, we secretly recorded.
That would
this
be the
phone
most
call.
transparent thing that's happened during this whole debate.
my
We don't know
gosh.
what they're doing, and I think the point that I think the point in the
The question is,
where
I'm
is
glad I
that?
woke you up.
stakeholders have been publicly, have publicly expressed advocacy, whether it's faith leaders, whether it's healthcare providers, even the Economic Council put out a statement that at least made reference to using federal dollars this week, which is kind of a step beyond what they did before. The premise of the question and what is we're seeing all these stakeholders make public pronouncements. Not to say that they don't support it, but where is that voice?
I don't know. I think. I mean, I don't think I have to defend myself anymore on this. I mean, I made up.
Well, you didn't have to say anything.
Well,
You could have just let it roll.
But I disagree with you on that.
Well,
yes, I have to say something.
They have a heavy bat.
I mean, I don't like you.
They could have helped. They are persuasive on members of the legislature, and it's disappointing that they haven't done more. I don't see any pressure. I don't see any pressure. I don't see any public pronouncements.
I can't convince you otherwise.
No,
so I'm not gonna
you
try.
can't. You can't. And if it fails, it'll have a lot to do with their failure. I mean, they are one of the big stakeholders who have a lot of money, who are big employers in these places, who understand the cost of uncompensated care in Mississippi more acutely than most people do. And it's just kind of hard to find out what exactly you folks have a big voice and a big hand in this. And it's always odd when you have a situation like this when you don't know what they're doing.
For years.
Poorly, because they don't have a solution.
kind of situation?
I'm talking about hospital administrators have been working on ways to manage the uncompensated care problems that all these hospitals have, and this is obviously one solution for that. These are conversations, strategies, debates, policy discussions that they've been having with members, leadership for a number of years, and finally the time has come where it was an opportunity for the legislature to debate this issue, to vote on this issue. So I just don't think it's fair to say, well, I almost cussed, I didn't. Where the heck have
It's Friday, buddy. Come on.
the administrators? Where are they?
Yeah, it's not the biggest issue. It's funny that we've gotten this energetic about it. It's clearly not the biggest issue. It is one of the curiosities.
Did
of
the Broncos starting quarterback get hurt already or something?
You presume we have a starting quarterback. I think even
That's another conversation. And it's not to say that they aren't doing anything, they aren't making any, they're not advocating, with lawmakers. But I think it's fair to wonder where they are publicly, and that's the
Can I
thought.
say one more thing on
Say
this?
one
And
more
I swear
thing on this.
I'll do it in 10 seconds. Sometimes you can have the most powerful conversations, make the most meaningful changes with a quiet conversation with a member in your district.
Let's hope that's happening.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Sticking with this real quick, conferees have been named. We have Sam Creekmore, Missy McGee, and I'm missing the third.
Is it
Joey Hood.
Joey Hood in the House. And then we have Senators Bryce Wiggins, Nicole Boyd, and Chairman Kevin Blackwell on the Senate. So just real quick thought, on the conferee selection.
Yeah.
And maybe kind of what that makeup tells us about where the potential result of conference could come. And then I have one more on this before we move on. Go ahead.
Smart people who really understand Medicaid. Obviously, you have the two chairmen of the Medicaid committee, and Chairman McGee and Blackwell. Bryce Wiggins used to be, I think, chairman of Medicaid. Last 4 years, very knowledgeable in this. Sam Creekmore, chairman of Public Health. These are smart people. Of course, the negotiations are going to be led by the two committee chairmen and the speaker and the lieutenant governor. But I like it. These are really good conferees, and I can't wait for the debate. I do hope we still have a public. Live streamed hearing. I think they've kind of walked out on that plank, and they don't have any choice but to do that. So it'd be really interesting to see when that's going to happen.
Yeah.
I assume Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday,
possibly, or it could get into the weekend.
That's right.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, hey, let's hope we do. Last week was Transparency Week. We're a week later, and still no public conference. I want to remind everybody that both the House and Senate have agreed to rules that say all conference committees should be public. I just think that's an important note to keep making. If rules matter anymore. Those 6 people, if left to their own devices, would give us full Medicaid expansion. Period.
You think so?
This boils down to Delbert Hosemann. Jason White.
You read my mind.
Jason White wants Medicaid expansion. All of his conferees would vote for it. 2 of the 3, at least, in the Senate would vote for it. And then you would have the Senate left to deal with this. So these 6 conferees would give us Medicaid expansion in Mississippi if left to their own devices. 2 of the 3 Senate conferees want it.
You're saying they would all vote for the House plan?
They would give us something that was like a fulsome, not some type of stripped down weird thing that probably wouldn't even pass muster. And so it boils down to Delbert Hosemann. And I think this is the biggest policy moment of Delbert Hosemann's entire political life. I don't think there's anything bigger than this for him. I know he cares about his legacy. He cares about what people think about him. He cares how he's looked at. And if he drops the ball, as he seems poised to do, Austin, it'll be the biggest failure of his political career, because if he wants it, Mississippi would have it. And he's been, as we've talked about, or as I've argued, kind of absentee throughout this debate.
I'm going to give you another side of that. I'm not so sure that you can blame or give all the credit, not so black and white, on Delbert. He's got 52 members. This is a 3/5 vote.
Right.
So do the math there, whatever the number is, and then
36, 37,
something like that. Yeah. Then if the governor vetoes, you got to be able to override a governor's veto. So he could be out there saying, I love the House plan. Let's do the House plan. But obviously, you're a former member. You got to have the vote. So I'm not so sure. And I know what you're going to say was, well, it's Delbert's. You would say it's Delbert's job to go get the votes. Mm-hmm. Sometimes that's, sometimes even when you were in the House, and if Billy McCoy may come to you, sometimes he may not be able to move you off an issue, even though y'all were a member of the same party. That was former Speaker of the House, Billy McCoy, for those keeping along at home. But So I'm not so sure it's that black and white, man. I'm not sure.
And it seems to me that the hang up, in the reporting that we've seen so far is the work requirement, and that is the thing that the lieutenant governor is hung up on. And I mean, is this a hill worth letting Medicaid die on?
13 states have asked for the work requirement. Some of those have said, if approved, put it in.
Yeah.
Speaker White has said, we don't disagree that you could add some work requirement language, but let's not let that torpedo the whole deal.
Right.
In the event that the federal government does what it has done 13 times before and says you can't have that as an enacting piece of the legislation. So there's even agreement on that. So he's actually debating with himself very publicly. No one is saying, to my knowledge, on the House or Senate side, that you can't have that language in there. The House is taking a reasonable position of saying, well, let's not let that sink the whole program.
Yeah.
And that's where Lieutenant Governor Hosemann becomes a very curious figure here. He may not want to remember this, and some people may not want to remember this, but he campaigned on the issue of Medicaid expansion 5 years ago. He has privately and somewhat publicly told people for years that if the House would send him a bill, he would pass it. Now, Austin, that's where I'm coming from.
I hear you.
This is inexplicable how he has conducted himself during this time when it looks like we are close to crossing the goal line on what would be one of the bigger policy moments. And he would get a lot of credit for it. He would get a lot of credit for it because he was one of the first Republicans to publicly say, this seems like a good idea. So he would look like a person who had the foresight to do something and then help it get done. And he seems to be in stasis. I mean, I don't know what's happening here.
I mean, you have a process. There's the legislative process. You have to be able to have the requisite number of votes to get it passed.
Hey, if we're here a week later and something's happened, this is the other thing too. This lack of transparency has really hurt him. It's hurt the process, but I think it's particularly hurt him from a political standpoint. And frankly, politically, Austin, you and I are both political people. We work on campaigns. We think about what people who seek these offices should do. I think this has been a terrible session for him politically because you and I keep coming on the radio week after week guessing at what he thinks. Now, you might be right. He might not be doing himself any favors in the Senate to say, I love the House plan. But he ought to say something.
Well, no, I don't.
He ought to say what it is he would like.
I was just saying, if he came out and said, I like the House plan, they could have the Senate plan that's 99% of the House plan.
But we keep having to come in and guess.
I don't think that will pass. I don't think going beyond the 100% level of the federal poverty level, barrier of the federal threshold, whatever you want to say, the federal poverty level. I don't think there are the votes there to do that in the Senate. That could change. That could change Monday. But we just have to see. We have to see what happens in these negotiations. And I think it'll be really cool to see the live stream version of those.
Do we think that'll even happen? Because, I mean, if you talk to the conferees
You're talking
now.
about the public, the live stream?
You're right, because the conferees now don't seem to have any sense of when that might happen. And I don't know that we're necessarily cruising for that. I mean, I'm becoming less certain that public conferencing is going to happen on either of the two big issues facing the legislature.
Ask you this, and remind me, did both leaders come out and say we're going to do that?
Both have said that.
I think they'll do it. That was about 10 days ago or so. I think they'll have something. It'll be early next week. But we'll see. Yeah.
Well, they're going home for the weekend, and next week's
right.
proves to be a big week. That leads me to this next part, which is we're at the part of the session where you have another thought.
I just talked to a couple members on my way here. Not everybody's going home this weekend.
Okay, some people are working. They gavelled out early. 2 people could go home.
That's right. There's some conference conversations happening. Again, sadly, not where anybody can see them, but there's some folks talking.
All right. But as I was saying, this is the part of the session where many budget bills get the conference treatment as well. There still isn't clear agreement on education funding this session. We haven't discussed this much, but the Department of Health is asking for increases to ramp up its public health accessibility. We talked last week about the Department of Transportation wanting money for roads, bridges, infrastructure. So as we kind of enter next week, which budget battles are you most paying attention to, Austin?
Well, I'm most paying attention to infrastructure. It and PERS, that's the interesting one. That's sort of the number thrown around loosely at the Capitol is a $200 million number for PERS.
And do you mean that as a cash infusion from the legislature?
Yeah, right. that would sort of potentially offset what the employer match would be that the PERS board agreed to. That was the 2% match for this upcoming year. That's just a number that's thrown around. We'll see. Who knows? There's a lot of negotiating. I think that is a really interesting to see because will both chambers go, okay, let's just put the money in and make no other changes? They've talked a lot of changes. Obviously, the House passed a plan that had a complete overhaul of the PERS board. Yeah. The Senate did not pass a plan. They had a lot of open conversations about that. So I wouldn't be shocked if there's we're going to agree to put $10 million or $200 million into it. That there would also have be some policy decisions that they would make dealing with the board and so forth. But then infrastructure. All this would go to MDOT. That's another huge ticket item. $300 to $500 million for capacity projects, for paving, for maintenance. These are big dollars. Whatever our surplus is, which is likely, around $1 billion or more. That gets eaten up very quickly when you give $200 million to PERS. Do they reach a deal on education?
Yeah.
And that could be $200 million. So, even for somebody from Yazoo City, that's kind of easy math to figure out. That sucks that money up fast.
Yeah,
and I'm sorry, just one other thing. You're right. Every state agency is going to have their wish list.
Right.
IHL, community colleges, they're all got, hey, we've got this piece of paper with 25 million or 225 million of projects we need to get done. So it'll be very interesting to see what the ultimate priorities are that both the House and the Senate make on these big funding decisions that they're likely getting talking a lot about this weekend and early next week.
Yeah. What about you? Which ones are you looking at? Budget battles?
Both chambers have said there's $250 million available for additional education spending. They should go ahead and knock that out right now.
Yeah.
I mean, let's go ahead and move that over.
Well, the problem
into the existing program, but all of these issues, we're talking about very major expenditures of the state. All of these issues would be benefited by having public conference committee hearings. They would be. I mean, look, you had Senator Hobb Bryan on the program today, and he spoke very clearly and eloquently about the history of how this conference committee stuff works and why open conferences are so helpful. And he was exactly right. And you mentioned him earlier, Speaker Billy McCoy. When I served there, these subjects were subject to open conversations. Johnny Stringer would sit there and the press could be in the room. Anyone can ask questions. And one thing that you found out during the course of that process was there would be someone who's not in the legislature who had expertise, who could offer assistance. Because as we've talked about before, these folks are not specialists. As great as those 6 conferees that we just mentioned about Medicaid expansion, they're not specialists in any of this. And so you desperately need input and insight and oversight. And these budget decisions that are being made, the unfortunate reality is whatever decisions are made, they're going to be dropped upon lay people who are elected to serve in the legislature. They're going to get a few minutes to read it. They're going to have to take whoever is standing at that podium's word for it. And that's an unfortunate thing. We would do much better with it because these are huge amounts of money, as you said, Austin. And why on earth would we not want that to be subject to a public conversation? But for me, the education piece is a big piece, and they've both said they have it. And I think the best thing to do would be to go ahead and move that into the education conference.
They can't agree on how the formula that is going to inform that funding.
Yeah, and I think they'll have to come up with an agreement there before they're going to agree to put a bunch more money into it. But if I can just say this, whether it's education or PERS, or hearing from state agencies or infrastructure, each of these chairmen and a number of members, if we just talk about infrastructure, whether it's DeSoto County, Lafayette County, Rankin County, Jackson County, their members are hearing from the local elected officials back home to say, hey, we got a widen I-55, or we've got a Highway 7 in Lafayette County needs attention, or whatever the issue is. They're having constant conversations with leadership, with their members from their homes, with the finance chairman, with the appropriations chairman, with the Ways and Means chairman throughout the session about this. So they're getting lots of educated expert advice on no matter what the issue is. And I do understand what you're saying, though. At the end, there is a bill that's put on on a member who may not have been a part of that conversation, but certainly that's been the process for a really, really, really long time about here it is. Let's have, we can debate it right here on the floor, but that usually is not much of a debate.
You can still be a fan of these people and tell them that their process is out of whack. You do not need to defend this process. It should be open. The notion that somebody from Jackson County can call a senator from Jackson County, that's all well and good, but it's all subject to the person on the receiving end of that phone call.
Of course.
Some senators take the call. Some do not. Some senators don't know how to work email. Some do. Look, this is a bad process. It should be open. If you're going to be the person that's putting forth the thing that's going to change the lives of thousands of Mississippians, you should sit in a place where people can come and talk to you and where they can offer insight or they can ask a question. And where we can see the contours of the negotiation. Like here we are again, billions of dollars being spent, and we're guessing
I know
what these people are doing.
I guess my point is, I don't just think this is something that's new. I think we've had this process for a long time. I think it's better now, thankfully, because of technology. The Senate's done a really good job. You can see everything online, every committee meeting they have, and I think the House will get there soon. I think it's a better process now than it was. Doesn't mean it's great. Doesn't mean it can't be improved.
I did watch 2 Senate hearings this morning on YouTube from my office. I mean, there's no question. There's some opportunity here. I do want to say this again, though, Austin. We talked about transparency last week. We just haven't seen any public vetting of these big issues: education, Medicaid, PERS, budget considerations. The people listening to this program know more about those now than they did last week. And that's a strike against the transparency of these bodies. Just
very quickly, Chris Johnson did have a 2.5, maybe 3 hour open meeting on PERS where lots of PERS boards members of the PERS board came in and testified. I sat through that. And
there have been hearings with the Hilltop Institute as well on Medicaid expansion.
Gotcha.
But as far as the nuts and bolts.
So y'all feel good. So we're transparent now?
100%.
So it's been a transparency week for you guys?
Just
okay, good.
Just putting things out
maybe
there.
I'm mistaken.
No, putting things, just stating some facts.
It's always somewhere in the middle, Brandon. It's just like
the NBA playoffs have started. I'm not paying close attention.
When your kid comes home and says, the teacher was mean to me. No, wait a minute.
I'm just putting
was
some facts
the teacher
up
mean
there.
to me, or did you do something wrong? It's probably somewhere in the middle.
Real quick, though, as we talk about the budget and everything, one thing that that in the last few years we've kind of has come into the session hot. Was it an income tax reduction or income tax reform? We're nearing the end, and really no buzz, no whisper or anything. What does that say about how lawmakers are viewing the budget?
I think there's not been much conversation about that, and it's not going to be because obviously we're too late for something that big. He said this 3 months ago. Particularly on the speaker side, he was bringing up a lot of big, tough issues to try to accomplish. And so I think those have sucked up all the oxygen in the room. You just went through the list a second ago.
Right.
So I don't think there was a space for income tax reduction in this session. And, hopefully we'll get a lot of these other ones done. Education, formula reform. What are we going to do about Medicaid expansion? What are we going to do about PERS? What are we going to do about capacity projects through infrastructure, through MDOT? And then we can have a conversation next year if that debate needs to happen. What do we do about tax reform?
It's why people should listen to the show. We've made pretty decent predictions in here. Austin said, as we were getting into mid-session, he was like, "You're not going to hear this." So, and Austin knows more than any of us. Let's face it. He needs an injection of transparency as bad as any of us. He knows what's happening over there. He's holding out on it. I have to drag it out of him. I actually come to this radio program so I can figure out what my government's up to.
From
so
Austin
I can
Barber?
cross-examine Barber.
That's false.
But no, he said that. So yeah, I think that's exactly right. We're at maximum capacity on the stuff that this legislature can possibly work through, and my guess is that a couple of these big things that we're talking about are ultimately not going to get worked through.
All right, we'll leave it there.
And they got probably a week left. I know they're trying to get out. You hear rumors mid to late next week.
Yeah,
do y'all not find that funny? Isn't there an irony to that? Like we just identified many things that are left unresolved, and the only thing that they can really get excited about is going home.
Going home.
Can I suggest that's a silly thing? But I think that's old politics. I think years ago it used to be kind of the funny thing to be like, well, we're going to save the taxpayers' money, and how about you just use the taxpayers' monies wisely to have open conversations about the big issues, get those conversations handled appropriately. We don't care when you go home. Be here on Saturday, Sunday, Monday. Nobody cares about that.
I think there's a strategy to this, though, my friend, which is
I'm
looking at my calendar.
All right.
I think the official sine die day was, I don't know, the 5th or the 6th of May, something like that. If they get out next week, if they get out the 25th, the 26th, that would give them 5 calendar days in case the governor vetoed something that they did, that they could then come back and address that during this regular session.
So they wouldn't go sine die.
They wouldn't.
They would just
I guess
adjourn.
not. I guess yeah, they wouldn't go sine die. So then they could therefore come back and deal with a governor's veto during this regular session, because obviously, and I had to be reminded of this rule about a week ago. They can't override or sustain a governor's veto unless they're in session. Could be a special session, I believe.
Kirk
or a
Fordyce
regular
once
session.
did that. It did not go well for him. And I don't see Tate Reeves calling a special session for the legislature to override a veto.
So I think that's why they're thinking, hey, if we can get out early, that gives us that opportunity.
I just think it's just hayseed
Strategery.
politics. I think
Strategery.
it's something that for years we used to think was really, let's tell the voters that we're going to shut down early. Well, that's all fine and good unless all of your issues remain unresolved. I don't think your boss wants to hear you say, well, I haven't done any of my work, but I can leave at lunch. Well, I tell you what, why don't you just finish your job and then you go home at a normal time?
Would do that. They're not just going to go, bye, we hadn't done anything.
Well, so far that's all we're hearing. They need to hush up about going home.
We'll see if there is any strategy behind the timing of when they get these bills to the governor. Any final thoughts?
No.
We're done? All right.
We've said enough.
I think so. This has been At Issue on MPB Think Radio, a weekly discussion about the 2024 Mississippi legislative session. If you can't catch us live each Friday at 6:30, At Issue can be streamed on demand on the MPB Public Media app, or you can subscribe to the At Issue podcast. Each week's podcast includes an extended version of our weekly interview, as well as an extended version of our roundtable discussion. And if you'd like to see what we all look like, Brandon in his Denver Broncos hat, the full interview and roundtable are available on YouTube. Just search Mississippi Public Broadcasting At Issue. I'm Michael Guidry from all of us at MPB. Thanks for listening.